The early days were a secret. The Prophet, peace be upon him, knew that the message he carried, the call to worship one Allah, was too revolutionary, too dangerous for the immediate public square of Mecca. So, the first 3 years of this new era were conducted entirely in silence. This was the time of the secret call, a period where the seeds of a global faith were planted in the hearts of a handful of individuals. The first to embrace the message was his wife, Khadijah. She was his confidant, his first believer, and her faith provided the quiet strength he needed. Then came his cousin Ali, who was just a boy living in the household. His servant, Zayd, a man beloved by the Prophet, also accepted the message. The first person outside of the household to embrace Islam was Abu Bakr, a respected merchant, known for his gentle nature and trustworthy character. Abu Bakr became the unofficial recruiter. Through his influence and wisdom, 5 more men, pillars of the future community, were brought into the fold: Zubair, Talha, Saad, Uthman, and Abdul Rahman. This small group, the Prophet, Khadijah, Ali, Zayd, Abu Bakr, and the 5 men brought by Abu Bakr were the first stones in the foundation of Islam. They worshipped in secret, meeting in the secluded valleys around Mecca, or in the house of Al-Arqam near the hill of Safa, away from the prying eyes of the Quraysh elite. The Prophet would gather them there to recite the verses of the Quran and instruct them in prayer. Year after year, the number grew quietly, reaching a total of perhaps 130 believers, comprised mostly of the young, the poor, and the unconnected people searching for a truth. The proud society of Makkah had denied them, but secrets cannot last forever. After 3 years of building this quiet community, a new command descended from the heavens. Therefore proclaim openly that which you are commanded and turn away from the polytheists. The time for secrecy was over. The time for open confrontation had arrived. The Prophet's first public act was a dramatic one, delivered from the summit of Mount Safa. Overlooking all of Mecca, he stood there, high above the city, and called out to the clans of the Quraysh, asking them to gather. When they assembled, he posed a simple yet profound question. If I were to tell you that behind this mountain there was an enemy army ready to attack you, would you believe me? The answer from the crowd was unanimous. Yes, they replied. We have never heard you tell a lie. He then delivered his warning. I have come to you to warn you of a great punishment. The entire audience fell silent. This was not the expected political talk. His uncle, Abu Talib, stood there, listening intently. But another uncle, Abu Lahab, known for his pride and venomous temper, shouted out a vile curse. May you perish! Is this why you have gathered us? This outburst marked the beginning of the open conflict. From that moment on, the relationship between the believers and the powerful Meccan establishment changed forever. The Quraysh began a relentless campaign of harassment, mocking the Prophet and his message. They called him a poet, a soothsayer, a madman, anything to discredit the truth. The primary target of the persecution, however, was not the Prophet himself. He was shielded by the powerful family protection of his uncle, Abu Talib, who, though he never fully accepted Islam, refused to abandon his nephew. Instead, the Quraysh turned their anger on the weak, the poor, and the foreign converts who had no clan protection. The persecution was brutal and systematic. Take the example of Bilal. He was an Ethiopian slave of Umayyah. Umayyah would drag Bilal out into the hottest desert sands at noon and lay him on his back, placing a heavy, searing rock on his chest. In the midst of this unimaginable torture, he would demand that Bilal renounce Islam. Bilal's only response was the constant, unwavering whisper, Allah is the only one. God is one, God is one. One Allah. There was a believer, Ammar, whose family, his father Yasir and his mother Sumayya, were subjected to the most cruel punishments. Sumayya, in an act of barbaric violence, became the very first martyr in Islam, killed for her faith. The Prophet would pass by them as they were tortured and could only offer words of comfort, saying, "Be patient, family of Yasir, for your rendezvous is paradise." The list of the tortured was long. Khabbab, a swordsmith, who was made to lie on burning coal until the melting fat from his back extinguished the fire. Another new Muslim, a slave beaten so mercilessly that he lost consciousness. The believers endured all this with patience that stunned their persecutors. This steadfastness was not mere stubbornness. It was a deep, unshakable conviction rooted in the verses of the Quran. They had been commanded to be patient, for the future belonged to the patient. But the persecution became so severe, so unbearable, that the Prophet realized he had to act to save his community. He looked for a safe haven. He chose Abyssinia, the kingdom of Aksum, modern-day Ethiopia. Its ruler, the Negus, was known to be a just and fair Christian king. The Prophet told his followers, "If you go to Abyssinia, you will find the king there under whom no one is wronged. It is a land of truth." In the 5th year of the Prophet's mission, a small group of 12 men and 4 women secretly slipped out of Mecca and headed to the coast. This was the first migration to Abyssinia, a pivotal moment in history, the first time Muslims left their homeland to preserve their faith. The Quraysh were furious when they discovered the escape. The news that a group of their former subjects was living peacefully and safely under a foreign king was an insult to their authority. But a far greater and more joyful shock was about to hit Mecca. 2 figures whose conversion dramatically changed the power dynamics of the city. The first was Hamza. He was the Prophet's uncle and foster brother, a powerful man known for his strength, courage, and love of hunting. One day, returning from a hunt, he was told that the Prophet had been violently abused by Abu Jahl, one of the Quraysh's most vicious leaders. A rush of powerful protective fury seized Hamza. Without saying a word, he marched straight to the Kaaba, where Abu Jahl was sitting with the Quraysh leaders. Raising his heavy bow, Hamza brought it down hard upon Abu Jahl's head, splitting it open. "Will you insult him when I am of his religion?" Hamza thundered. "Say that back to me if you dare." Abu Jahl's companions rushed to defend him, but a shaken Abu Jahl restrained them, saying, "Leave Hamza alone." "I did indeed insult his nephew grievously." The impulsive act of anger suddenly turned into a conviction. Hamza's conversion provided a massive boost to the fledgling community. With a powerful protector in their ranks, the Muslims were now able to move and worship with slightly more freedom. Not long after, the community witnessed another monumental event, the conversion of Umar. Umar was, at that time, one of the most zealous, violent, and feared opponents of Islam. He was the strong arm of the Quraysh, someone who actively persecuted the believers. One day, he left his home, sword in hand, intending to kill the Prophet and end the problem of Islam once and for all. A man encountered him on the way and warned him to first look at his own family. Furious and confused, Umar rushed to his sister, Fatma, and her husband Said, only to find them reciting verses of the Quran. He violently attacked them both, injuring his sister. Bleeding, Fatma bravely stood up to him and declared their faith, saying, "O Umar, you may do what you will, but we have become Muslims and we believe in Allah and His Messenger." Seeing the blood on his sister's face and hearing the absolute conviction in her voice, a profound moment of regret and awe washed over him. He asked to see the scroll they were reading. He read the beautiful, powerful verses, and the words pierced his hardened heart. Umar immediately proceeded to the house of Al-Arqam, where the Prophet was gathered with his followers. Upon entering, he declared his faith. The Muslims, who had previously been forced to pray in hushed secrecy, rejoiced with a loud cheer, a cheer so powerful it could be heard across Mecca. The conversion of Umar was a public spectacle, not a quiet conversion. From that day, the Muslims could pray openly at the Kaaba, challenging the Quraysh in their own domain. It was an astonishing turn of events, a divine shift in the balance of power. The two Umars, they used to say Umar bin al-Khattab and Ammar bin Hisham, who was Abu Jahl, were the most powerful men in Mecca. Now, one of them stood in the ranks of Islam. Meanwhile, in Abyssinia, the Quraysh were not resting. They sent a delegation led by Ammar bin al-Aratt and Abdullah bin Abi Rabi to the court of the Negus. They brought valuable gifts for the king and his court and presented their case, claiming the Muslims were foolish runaways who had left their ancestral faith. The delegation argued that these Muslims held heretical beliefs, diverging from both the Meccan polytheism and the Negus' own Christianity. The Negus, a just ruler, summoned the Muslims to hear their defense. The Muslims chose Jafar, the cousin of the Prophet, to speak on their behalf. Jafar stood before the king, the bishops, and the Quraysh envoys, and delivered a powerful, moving speech. He explained their former life of darkness, drinking blood, committing immorality, severing ties of kinship, and the strong preying on the weak. Then, he spoke of their prophet. Allah sent to us a messenger from amongst ourselves, whose lineage, truthfulness, trustworthiness, and chastity we all knew. He called us to Allah, to testify to his oneness and to worship him, and to cast away the stones and idols which we and our forefathers used to worship. He commanded us to be truthful in speech, to fulfill our trusts, to regard the rights of kinship, and to be good to our neighbors. When Jafar finished, the Negus asked him to read something from what had been revealed to the prophet. Jafar recited the opening verses of Surah Maryam, the chapter of Mary, which speaks of the birth of Jesus and his mother. As Jafar recited, the Negus and his priests were moved to tears, their beards becoming wet with emotion. The Negus declared, "Verily this, and what Jesus brought, have come from the same source of light." He then turned to the Quraysh delegation and declared, "You may go. I swear by Allah, I shall never surrender them to you, and your men shall not be plotted against." The plot of Quraysh had completely failed. Some of the emigrants heard a false rumor that the entire Quraysh tribe had accepted Islam. So they returned to Mecca, finding the persecution worse than ever. Some had to enter the city under the protection of other powerful Meccans. The Quraysh were furious at their failure in Abyssinia and renewed their campaign of terror. The conversions of Hamza and Umar were a great consolation. But the Prophet and his community knew that the struggle for their faith had only just begun. The Quraysh, stripped of their easy targets and facing a new challenge from within, were about to unleash a new form of resistance, far more devastating than any physical torture.